Marcusile here. So today I want to talk about the importance of understanding the role your pelvic floor plays during pregnancy. So it's, there's some of the really obvious ones that, in order to birth a baby vaginally through, our pelvic floor, that's a huge role our pelvic floor plays, okay? But first, before we even get to birth, I want to talk about really what your pelvic floor is first, because I get a lot of questions from you amazing ladies of like, okay, Erica, I hear you talking so much about the pelvic floor, but what really is the pelvic floor? So many times it's addressed as like, oh, just do your Kegels, do Kegels, right? The problem with always doing Kegels, ladies, is that it actually can create a too tight of a pelvic floor and an imbalance of the pelvic floor, because Kegels in general tend to work more the front of our pelvic floor and just leave the rest of our pelvic floor neglected. So when we're not really even understanding how big our pelvic floor is and the full role it plays, it can prevent you from really having the properly, strengthened pelvic floor. Because we can't have too tight of a pelvic floor. We can't have too weak of a pelvic floor. So we have to find this like nice middle ground. Okay, so I like to explain the pelvic floor from a visual perspective of thinking of its shape. So I like to use like a diamond. I'll put it in front of my black shirt here so you can see. So if we think of like the diamond, the base of our pelvis, the shape of a diamond, okay? So the tip is like the front of our pubic bone. The back goes all the way pretty much to our tailbone, underneath our anus, right? So it's even deeper than our glutes. And the sides of it are the sits bones. So if you're sitting up right now, and sometimes it helps like sit on a pillow or something like that. Especially if it's hard for you to sit cross-legged, I would do this on a chair. Kind of like wiggle those sits bones back. You can do this sitting on an exercise ball even, because the exercise ball is great because it gives you some tactile feedback of your pelvic floor. Or you could sit on a pillow, something like that, to just give you something to feel something against your pelvic floor. And so when we understand that our pelvic floor is actually quite surface area big, right? So it's that diamond, versus when we think of a Kegel, right? So many people think it's like the size of a quarter, right? So there's a huge difference from a quarter to like a big diamond at the base of our pelvis. So understanding that and starting to really visualize, because our brain loves visuals, right? So that can help us, number one, when we understand, oh, our pelvic floor is like the shape of a diamond, and it's so much more surface area than just that quarter that we think of for Kegels for so long. So I actually want you to just put the word Kegel off to the side. I think that's a very important thing to do. Just like set that to the side for right now. And we want to think of our pelvic floor as our pelvic floor. And so the other thing to understand about our pelvic floor is, while the musculature of the pelvic floor may be pretty thin, there's a lot of fascia that goes through our pelvic floor, through the pelvic floor musculature, and then above our pelvic floor into our core, right? So if we think, okay, if we've got the base of our pelvic floor here, the musculature, and then the fascia through that, we also have a thick layer of fascia that helps to hold our vagina and our uterus up, and it's through which the rectum runs, right? And then our bladder. So we have this layer of fascia that actually is above our pelvic floor in the base of our pelvis. So when we understand that that's there, and this is why I love teaching so much about fascia, and so much of what I teach for women during pregnancy really has to do with helping you to be more fascially strong. And the reason for that is that our fascia is, maybe think of it as like, like hose, like pantyhose. No one wears those anymore, right? Everyone knows still what they are. Like, it has that kind of give and pull, right? So this is when we start talking pelvic floor, there's a twofold on this. There's two really, really important pieces that we have to understand about how to strengthen our pelvic floor during pregnancy, but also how to release and relax our pelvic floor. And the two together work wonders for preparing us not only for our pregnancy, but also for birth and postpartum recovery. So I like to connect the dots, right? So we're not just a standalone, like, don't put individual body parts in one box. Like, it's all so interconnected, ladies. So our pelvic floor, we have to understand how to release and relax our pelvic floor. And this goes for even for my mamas who are thinking about having a cesarean birth. You still need to understand how to release and relax through your pelvic floor and your pelvis. So I also cue my mamas how to release in between their hips, right? Because our hip function, how our hips are working and how tight they are, how unstable they are, how imbalanced they are, that all plays a role in our pelvic floor. Okay? Our hamstring strength and connection, and our glute strength and connection, and our posture, it all plays a role in our pelvic floor function. This is why we can't just set pelvic floor off to the side. yes, we can address pelvic floor on its own, but for optimal function, we have to look at the body as a whole, okay? So the releasing and relaxing is really, really, really important. But on the flip side of that, we also have to learn how to properly strengthen and activate our pelvic floor in a very light, gentle connection. If we're over-activating our pelvic floor, that's actually working against us. And that's what a lot of women are doing, or you're over-activating part of your pelvic floor. That's what Kegels do. And that's why I don't like to use that word Kegels. And I don't use it when, anytime when I'm teaching my pregnant mamas how to properly strengthen her core. And it is very, very, very important during pregnancy to do core work. Now, let me explain. When I say core, ladies, I am not talking about doing crunches and abs, stuff like that, right? I talk about core as from the base of your pelvic floor, all through your torso, underneath your shoulders and your rib cage, because that all plays a role in our deep core function. Very, 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 very important for pregnancy to help give us the support that we need for our growing baby, to give our pelvic floor the support that it needs, because you're having the weight of growing baby on your pelvic floor can be a stressor to your pelvic floor. So it's really important we understand how to properly activate our pelvic floor so that we don't have to deal with incontinence, peeing your pants a little bit here and there, or even a lot, and helping to prevent or worsening pelvic organ prolapse. I get a lot of women that end up finding me, and she's like, Erica, oh my gosh, and she over-exercised as far as addressing from her pelvic floor from a previous pregnancy, or got back to exercising too hard early postpartum, and she created some pelvic organ prolapsing. And so I wanted to bring that up today because it's a very important thing to understand that can happen. Our uterus can start to protrude down through our vagina, and we need to understand that can happen, but it doesn't need to happen, okay? It's preventable, ladies. It is so preventable, and that's why a big part of everything I teach throughout my pregnancy membership is you have to start with fundamentals. A lot of women find me because they want to exercise during pregnancy, and that's great. I'm all for that. We have to come back and understand our pelvic floor, okay? So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I really hope that helps kind of clarify a little bit more of the role that our pelvic floor plays during pregnancy, because what we do during pregnancy, again, ultimately can help prepare us for birth, and that's a big thing. We have so many incredible testimonials from our mamas that learn everything that I teach them, because she understands about how to open up her pelvis to allow for baby to more easily come out of her birth canal, which helps to minimize and even prevent tearing, and even with first-time mamas, and that's amazing. And that can really have an amazing and profound effect on your postpartum recovery. So thank you so much for joining me today. And again, reach out if you ladies have any questions. You can go to knockedupfitness.com for more information.